the ambiguity in the act, well, not ambiguity and its redundancy. How I see it, there's already like so many regulatory bodies that do the work that this act does, and so to bring another law to penalize, I feel, you know how they say we're doing deterrence, punishment, or rehabilitation. This act does nothing about that. All it does is punishes civil society, feminist organizers, queer organizers for the work that they've dedicated so much time to. And so when I think about it again, queer organizers already face a lot of risk when it comes to organizing. What are some of the things on top of your head that this act adds on? And this is to both of you.
Things that the act adds on?
As it goes to risk, the legal risks that it poses for queer organizers.
Okay. One of the things, like Shady has been talking about, oh my God, I didn't introduce myself. I'm D, guys. Sorry. So, back to business. So, in defining political activities, I think that is in political activities, that should be in section 1, the interpretation section. They talk about political activities and they define democracy, this. But the very last one, the very last provision on the very last provision on political activities definition talks about any activities that are, it is actually yes, if any activities aimed at influencing, imposing, or normalizing ideologies which are inconsistent with the Constitution or which conflict with any culture, customs, or norms of any of the communities listed in the third schedule to the Constitution. So when we look at our organizing, we work with queer organizing generally involves people that are involved in sex work, HIV advocacy, and work around generally queer people. We already have the Anti-Homosexuality Act that affects queer people, queer people are already criminalized there. So it's very clear that our culture and the culture of Ugandans is the social culture norms of Ugandans are very homophobic, they're very heteronormative, and they're quite hateful. So we frown on people like people who are living with HIV, for example, people doing sex work, and LGBTIQ persons, and we've already even enacted laws that criminalize these people. We know very well that we have a whole Anti-Homosexuality Act 2023, but we also have for against sex work, we have the provisions in the Penal Code Act that speak to the criminalization of sex work with up to 7 years in prison. That could include things like living off the proceeds of sex work. That is actually absolutely obnoxious, because
doesn't that almost include their children?
Yes, actually it includes your children and anyone that is feeding off that money. So if you're paying tuition, if you're doing what, if you're living off the proceeds
your kid during a lecture is wild.
So also there's staying in places where sex work is known to be done, brothels, owning and staying in those places. So if you have a brothel, and anything could be a brothel, it could be in my house and I'm doing sex from there. They could easily say that's sex work. But also we have those designated places, they're hotels, they're lodges. So what happens to people who are actually using those places for lodging? But even if they weren't just using those places for lodging and indeed they're doing sex work, why do we want to go ahead and legislate what they're doing behind closed doors if you're not, harming anyone? But that's besides the point. Our point here is the culture. So political activities, automatically advocating for work for queer rights, because it goes against our, heteronormative and homophobic culture, is already a political activity. So that means all of our work that we're doing in queer organizing falls within the ambit of this law. So that is...
Plus this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this podcast, interestingly, also falls under the ambit of the Anti-Homosexuality Act and the thing of promotion of homosexuality. But, information is power. We don't want to wake up sleeping dogs or something. But yes, it basically illegalizes everything that we're doing. So that is risky. So that means all the work you're doing is already criminalized. But now this is double criminalization, but it also is adding a layer of surveillance. When you look under the Protection of Sovereignty Act, they have certain requirements that they require you to do if you're registering. So you may say, you know what, I would like to comply with what the law says. Let me go and register. Then when you go to register, they're going to ask you for records of who your donors are, what work they're funding, what exact activities are you doing, what are the names of the people you're working with, who are your staff. That means it goes back to affecting the organization in itself, the people who work for the organization, the people they work with, and even the donors, first of all, because now they're looked at as people who are promoting foreign policy, and generally everyone you're associating with, including your clients. So that is very, very risky work. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dee, for that. Shady.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Josie.
Yay.
Okay, I feel like this law, it strengthens laws that are already violating us in so many ways. Like Dee has been sharing, when you look at the AHA and you see the ways that this act can enforce the AHA, you have to be really worried. Because, for example, something like promoting homosexuality was so wide in the AHA, like what exactly are you, how can we promote it? But if you combine that with this new act, for someone to be promoting interests or ideologies that are not national ideologies, that can be promoting something. So if you get that and they charge you both under the AHA and this sovereignty act, it sort of gives more, should I say, more water to some of these offenses that were flimsy, to say, with no offense, but yeah. So I feel like when, in addition to that, the way the law is structured and the powers that it gives the minister and the discretion, when we look at it through a feminist lens, it completely erodes any accountability or transparency from the minister, because when you apply to be registered, it's at the minister's discretion to say, oh, I've accepted, I've denied your application, but they don't give us any grounds on which, any substantial grounds that the minister can make this decision. It's entirely up to them. Basically it's at their discretion.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's violating us in many other ways and enforcing other violations that we've been working so far as a movement to try and challenge. When they require, even as an organization is registering, they require you to, like this age, you have to disclose this information. And as human rights defenders, we're thinking about the communities we work with, their right to privacy. When you just divulge this information, you're putting so many people's lives at risk. And in the digital age, we have to be very mindful about how we disperse this data.
Yes.
Because if back then they could easily get information and leak people's addresses on newspapers, what are they going to do now?
When we are posting on Instagram.
But even the state is taking that information
completely,
and we know the sentiment of the state. And with the way with the way Uganda is right now, if someone in the government took your private information and did whatever they want with it, if they doxed it, if they leaked it or something, it feels like we're in a state where there's very little justice you can get, especially against someone that's in that position of power. So it puts our communities at a more vulnerable place. Yeah.
You know what this is bringing to me is just the dawning fact that there is very little to be done. Once, as a queer person, you must be extremely advantaged as a Ugandan to get any justice against this government, right? And we can no longer claim democracy, you guys. Let's be so for real. There is nothing about that. And which brings me, I know people have broken down this act, yeah? But what are some of the things that have been maintained in the act and what went away in the first draft? Just briefly.
Remember when they first passed the law, there were things that we talked about that were introduced, for example, the definition of a foreigner, and that actually even included Ugandans that are living
Family
abroad.
members also.
That are, thank you. And it also included a lot of things generally. So I'm just going to give a few amendments.
And just run us through.
Yes, of what changed. So one of the first things that changed, it's basically the scope of the law. The law basically applied to any person. It applied to, in the very, very first definition, when you go back, it would say any person that is this, that, the other, any person. So that means that the scope was bigger. Anyone could be caught with it. But now, in the amended one, under section 2, you'll see that it only applies to, an agent of a foreigner, and like Shady, already defined succinctly who an agent of a foreigner is. First wait, that English succinctly. Anyway, that's besides the point. Yes, so that's one of the things. It defined foreigners to include Ugandans living abroad, but also it was talking about anyone. Anyone could be anyone. And now it was only said to apply to agents of foreigners, and obviously foreigners. So in another amendment was in the funding rule. It required written approval from the minister to get funds above 100k USD, that is 400 million Uganda shillings. That was changed. The law says that you simply have to declare. You don't need to seek approval. You simply have to declare. And then inspection. Back then, the law was saying the minister could inspect premises at any time without a court order. They'll just basically come into your offices and look around and all of that. Now they require a court order before premises can be inspected if they need to. And then there was also another law on some exemptions that were added. So first of all, before, the law basically did not exempt anyone. It said all funded entities. So all foreign funded entities were covered within that law. Within the amendment, they basically they exempted some people, and that included health entities, academic entities, faith-based, commercial, and FDI exempted entities.
We know exactly where they lie.
I know. So the thing about that is we had generally everyone at that point would be affected. But it's also important to note that the law says that the very first one was for everyone, whether you're registered or anything. But in this amendment, in the law that was actually passed, they said that if an organization or entity is already supervised, a supervised entity, those are commercial entities, banks and all of that. But it also said if the organization is already, or the entity is already regulated under a body by the law of the government, by the laws of Uganda, an act of parliament or anything, that means that they do not fall under the ambit of this law. And that is something that is very important to note, because it could cover organizations that are already registered in Uganda. I think what the law, though, that implies is that either you're going to get affected or caught at the point of trying to renew your permits. For example, if you're registered as an NGO.
Yes.
Or when you're trying to renew for CBOs. I don't know, what do CBOs do to renew?
CBOs, most times they go ahead and for their license.
Yes.
For their license at the districts where they are situated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So basically, I think it's going to affect organizations if they are not registered yet. So that's the things that are upcoming. And that goes again to show again what the intention of this law is, to stifle, civil society and whatever it is we're trying to do. So if you're registering and then they're asking you all of these questions, declare this, declare the other, that means you're going to be affected somehow. So those are some of the amendments. But I also want to add another few things to that. We had the penalties. Most of the penalties remained unchanged, but some of them reduced. So a lot of them still say that a lot of the penalties still say that you still have up to 20 years in prison and 100,000 currency points. That is 2 billion.
Yeah.
For a fine. So that didn't change much, but it changed in certain circumstances. Yes.
Okay. I love that. Thank you. I think this, for our listeners, it takes you back to do a little bit of a mapping of where you stand with these new changes and just to reflect back on that. But we will come back to this. I think we still have a lot more to discuss on that, Shady.
On the fact that the new version exempted some institutions, but they didn't pay any attention to human rights institutions or academia or medical institutions.
I think, like, when I think about that, thank you for bringing that back up also, is that for health institutions, especially since a lot of our organizing is on promotion and protection of health rights for minorities, for feminists, for women, there is a lot that we can do in our organizing so that we can protect the work that we are doing and how we deliver all these services to community. I liked what you said about organizations that are not yet registered, because you understand, you can imagine that a lot of grassroots movements are not registered. Right?
Yes.
And we've also seen the shift in funding with how funders are like, look, are you a collective of feminists? Because funding is also very gendered. You'd imagine that 0.02% of entire global funding comes to feminist movements.
Yeah.
That's insane. But also funders and donors and philanthropists have taken a shift. They're saying, are you a collective of people who can do work? We want to give you some kind of money.
But where is the proof that you can do the work?
Where is the proof that you can do the work? This is where this act comes in and says, now we don't want you to do that too much, because it is advocacy when this person in Kole district in Laonsab region is a feminist woman who may not even identify as a feminist as they would say, but all her work is promoting seed distribution for women in Kole. She goes to district, asks for this. This act will start to stifle that in a while if in some way someone reaches Kole district and sees the work that she's doing and says, you know what, I want to give you $1 million. Do this work, do this much more work, expand this within Kole and other districts within your region, and yet she's not a registered entity.
Even the channels through which you would get the money.
How will it reach you?
Because we already have so many laws. We have anti-money laundering laws. We have...
the FIA will come for
Thank you. We have requirements from the Financial Intelligence Authority. And the thing is, even when you're trying to open a bank account, because who is going to give you, for example, $1 million if the bank is registered in your name?
Yes.
Even when they're giving you 1K, small 1K here, 1,000, that's like 3.5 million Uganda shillings. You need to have a serious bank account. You need to have a TIN, a tax identification number. And it's not enough that the tax identification number is yours personally. They need one of an entity. They need you to have a governance structure. They need you have to have a governance structure. But also, the banks have been instructed, even when you're registering that bank account, they need you to have registered as an entity first of all. You cannot just come. You have to have registered as an entity. But meanwhile, even the avenues for registering as entities are very limited right now. Even when you're working, for example, to get a permit of operation, you're going to need things like MOUs. You need to have a strategic plan. You have to have all of these formal things. And meanwhile, the person that is funding is also asking you to give an example. The funders are also not willing to trust you if you're a new person that is coming on, on ground. So if you do not have anyone to vouch for you, but also the people vouching for you at this point want the money for themselves.
This is true.
So how are they going to vouch for you?
Yeah. And that's precisely what I wanted us to bring to light. Yeah. That for a well-organized NGO, it's easier to navigate this.
Yes.
Because you have information, you have a legal team,
Thank you.
You have someone giving you advice on the dot. And yet for a grassroots collective, it's a whole different reality, which then just gives us the real picture of what this act is doing. It's stifling everything. I wanted to pick one word, but I don't have the word. But the word is everything.
It's like triple stifling, because you've already had things that even the NGO bureau itself, for example, or even the requirements that you already have, there's already enough intelligence around it. There's already enough, what's it called when they're trying to see what you're doing?
Surveillance.
Thank you, guys. You speak so much English. But yes, there's already so much surveillance. So this is just surveillance and regulation. This is just another step that they've added to it. It's because all of the things that, for example, the Protection of Sovereignty Act provides for, they're provided for in laws already. Because if you are a foreign agent, for you to be able to register as, for example, a company limited by guarantee, you're supposed to be majority of your shareholders or your directors are supposed to be Ugandan. That is the first thing, for it to be registered as an indigenous organization. The first step is you're supposed to be Ugandans and you're supposed to be registered here. You're supposed to have a constitution. You're supposed to give objectives. And in fact, the very first step is for you to reserve a name. That is the first level of surveillance. And it's well within the right of the Register of URSB, for example, to say, I cannot register your organization because your name is committing crime.
5 times. They take you back 5 times.
Haven't we had that issue with SMAG, for example? There's that case that has gone all the way.
Which is a movement now and failed to be registered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because why? Their name, in fact, the registrar said, I'm rejecting this name because it is undesirable. And they said, what is undesirable about it? It is because it promotes criminal activities. So that is the first layer where you're going to be got from. I have a friend who sells clothes, and I think she wanted to register her business as femme something, and they were like, femme means lesbian in French.
That is crazy.
She couldn't register. She had to find a unit.
Also, it's the short form of female.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
So we already have all of those levels. So by the time you come to navigate registering as a foreign agent, for example, you've gone through all these levels of surveillance. Trust me, by then you'll have given up already. So for people to actually do this work, you must really care for the community. You must really want to do this work. It must be really worth it for you to do this work. And we know it very well because it's a lot of volunteer work. It's very political work. So many people may not be able to actually dedicate themselves that much. At the end of the day, should just whoever that person is that is trying to do the work will move on from it and start a business. Yeah.
Which you say go ahead.
Well, how many ops here in the studio, guys?